The hospital room smelled like disinfectant and fear. I was lying in bed, barely able to lift my head, waiting for a surgery that might save my life, when I checked my bank account. 43. My medical fund, $52,000, 15 years of saving, was gone. My hand shook so hard I nearly dropped the phone. I called the bank and heard the words that made my blood run cold. A woman came in crying, said her sister was dying. She signed right in front of me. My sister, Rebecca. I called her. She didn't deny it. She laughed, actually laughed, and said, "You think you'll live to spend that money? I needed a car. You're probably not going to make it anyway." The heart monitor beeped steadily as her words sank in. I couldn't breathe. But Rebecca made one mistake. She didn't know I'd spent 12 years working at that hospital. She didn't know who I had access to. And she definitely didn't know what I was about to discover about the $8,000 loan from 5 years ago. Have you ever been betrayed by the one person who was supposed to protect you? My name is Michelle Howard. I'm 36 years old, a financial analyst at a hospital in Columbus, Ohio. I've worked there for 12 years, never a complaint. After my divorce, I built a quiet, stable life alone. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I learned early that asking my family for help meant disappointment. My parents loved me, I believe that, but their love always came with conditions I could never quite meet. I wasn't dramatic enough, needy enough, broken enough to hold their attention. So I stopped asking. I stopped expecting. I became the daughter who was always fine, the one they never worried about. All their concern, all their money, all their energy flowed in one direction, toward my younger sister, Rebecca. Rebecca is 32. She's been divorced twice, changes jobs like seasons, and has a talent for turning every failure into someone else's fault. She's charming when she needs something, wounded when she's caught, and always has a story. 5 years ago, she called me crying, saying she'd maxed out her credit cards. I gave her $8,000. She swore she'd pay me back. She never did. I wrote it off as a hard lesson about family. I had no idea how wrong I was about what that money really meant. Our parents still send Rebecca money every month. They've never once asked if I need anything. I've spent my whole life making sure that assumption looked true. Then came the diagnosis: a tumor. Treatable, but the surgery needed to happen within 8 weeks, and the cost would be $47,000. My savings account held $52,000. 15 years of sacrifice. That fund wasn't just money. It was my safety net, my security, my future, and now it was going to save my life. I told my family at dinner, mentioning the surgery, the cost, and then, to reassure them, I mentioned my savings. Rebecca's eyes changed, just for a moment, though her voice stayed perfectly casual. "Which bank do you use? What if you're too sick to access the money yourself?" I thought it was concern. I told her the bank name, even mentioned the backup ATM card I kept at home. My parents' only response was, "Good that you're prepared. Rebecca's car broke down last week. We need to help her buy a new one." I drove home alone that night, telling myself it didn't matter. I had my surgery scheduled. I had my savings. I had a plan. What I didn't have was any idea what was coming. What I didn't know was that Rebecca had done this before, and that she was already planning to do it again. 3 days after that dinner, Rebecca showed up at my apartment with a pot of homemade soup and a look of concern I hadn't seen on her face since we were children. "I've been thinking about you," she said. "Let me stay and help you. You shouldn't be alone right now." I was exhausted from the medical tests, drained by fear of what was coming. So when my difficult, unreliable sister offered to take care of me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Maybe she was finally growing up. I let her in. I let her make me tea and fuss over me like I mattered. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept deeply, believing maybe I'd been too hard on her all these years. I woke up the next morning to find her gone. She'd left a note saying she had errands, but would check on me later. I thought it was sweet. I had no idea that while I'd been sleeping, she'd moved through my apartment with practiced efficiency. She found my backup ATM card in my desk drawer, right where I'd mentioned it at dinner. She found the notebook where I'd written my PIN. She photographed my driver's license from my wallet. I didn't notice any of it. I was too tired, too desperate to believe someone in my family cared. That desperation made me blind. 1 week later, everything changed. I woke up in the middle of the night with pain so sharp I couldn't breathe. By the time the ambulance got me to the emergency room, I was barely conscious. The doctors ran tests and finally told me what I'd been dreading. The tumor was growing faster than expected. They needed to operate within 48 hours. But first, they needed a deposit, $25,000. I nodded, still groggy from pain medication, and told them I had savings. I told them it wouldn't be a problem. I believed in that moment that the hardest part was behind me. I had prepared for this. I had done everything right. The next morning, a hospital administrator came with forms to sign. I asked for my phone to transfer the deposit from my savings. I pulled up my banking app and waited for the screen to load. When it did, I thought there must be a mistake. $43, $52,000, 15 years of sacrifice and discipline reduced to pocket change. My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. This couldn't be real. I called the bank. A representative confirmed that someone had used a secondary card to make 4 ATM withdrawals over 2 days, $10,000 each, the maximum daily limit. There was also a counter withdrawal for $8,000 made in person with a signature. They transferred me to Mrs. Patterson, a senior officer who had processed the in-person withdrawal. Her voice was heavy with regret. I remember her, a younger woman, very upset, crying about her dying sister needing money for treatment. She signed right in front of me. I should have looked more carefully at the signature. Something felt off, but she was so convincing, so emotional. I'm so terribly sorry. I thanked her, realizing she'd been manipulated by someone whose hand didn't shake when she forged her own sister's name. I called Rebecca. She answered on the second ring, and her voice was so casual, so unbothered, that for a moment I wondered if I'd made a mistake. But then she spoke, and every illusion I'd ever held about my sister shattered into pieces I would never be able to put back together. "Oh, you found out?" she said. Not a question, not an apology, just a flat acknowledgement. "Rebecca," I whispered, "that money was for my surgery. I could die without it." She laughed, actually laughed. The sound was so cold, so empty of anything resembling human feeling that I felt my whole body go numb. "You think you're going to live to spend that money?" she said. "Come on, Michelle, be realistic. I needed a car to get to work, to have a life. You're probably not going to make it anyway. Why let good money go to waste sitting in an account for a dead woman?" I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. The heart monitor beside my bed started beeping faster, and a nurse poked her head in, but I waved her away. I needed to understand what was happening. I needed to believe there was some explanation, some misunderstanding, some version of this where my sister hadn't just told me she'd stolen my chance at survival because she wanted a new car. But there was no other version. There was only the truth, And the truth was worse than anything I could have imagined. I called my parents. My hands were still shaking, and my voice broke as I told them what Rebecca had done. I expected shock. I expected outrage. I expected them to say they would fix this. Instead, my mother sighed, like I was being dramatic. "Rebecca's had a hard life," she said. "2 divorces, no stability. You know how she struggles." My father's voice came through in the background, tired and dismissive. "You've always been the strong one, Michelle. You'll figure something out." And then my mother said she had to go because Rebecca was calling on the other line, and the phone went dead. I lay there in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady beep of machines keeping track of my failing body, and I finally understood. I understood why nothing I ever did was enough. I understood why every sacrifice I made went unnoticed, while every crisis Rebecca created got immediate attention. I understood why I had spent my entire life feeling invisible in my own family. It wasn't because they forgot to love me. It was because they had made a choice years ago. Rebecca was the one they would protect, excuse, and fund no matter what she did, and I was the one they would use to make that possible. I wasn't their daughter. I was their safety net, and safety nets don't get rescued. They just absorb the fall. That night, alone in the dark of my hospital room, something inside me finally broke. But here's the thing about breaking. Sometimes what falls apart wasn't worth holding together in the first place. And sometimes, in the empty space where the old thing used to be, something stronger starts to grow. I didn't cry, I didn't beg, I didn't call my parents again, hoping for a different answer. Instead, I lay there in the darkness and made a decision. For 36 years, I had been the one who forgave, who forgot, who absorbed every blow and called it love. That was over. The next morning, I asked the nurse for my phone, and I called the one place I knew could help me fight back, the hospital's legal department. Rebecca had spent a decade learning she could take whatever she wanted from me. She was about to discover just how wrong she was. 2 days after my surgery, a man named David Morrison came to see me. He was from the hospital's legal department. He pulled a chair up to my bed, opened a folder, and began asking questions. I told him everything. The dinner, Rebecca's visit, the stolen ATM card, the forged signature, the phone call where she'd laughed at the idea of me surviving. When I finished, he studied the documents I'd gathered. "The charges are serious," he finally said. "Theft by deception, forgery, potentially identity fraud. These are felonies under Ohio law. Your sister could face real prison time." He looked up from the folder, and something in his eyes sharpened. "But there's something else. The signature forgery on that counter withdrawal, it's clean, confident. Most first-time forgers hesitate, their hands shake. This one doesn't have any of that. It looks practiced." He paused. "Miss Howard, people don't just wake up one day knowing how to forge signatures perfectly. I'd like to run some background checks on your sister's financial history, just to be thorough." I thought about the $8,000 from 5 years ago, small things that never quite added up. "Do it," I said. "Check everything." The surgery happened on schedule. I woke up, groggy and sore, but alive. The tumor was out. The day after surgery, Dr. Caroline Webb, the hospital director, came to my room. She had reviewed my situation. 12 years of employment, perfect record, never asking for anything. This hospital doesn't abandon its people, she told me. "We're setting up an interest-free payment plan for your surgery. Focus on getting well and fighting your fight. We'll handle the rest." It was the first real kindness I'd received since this nightmare began. Within 3 weeks, I was home, recovering faster than expected.
I used my anger to fuel what came next. Every day, I worked with Morrison on building the case. Rebecca predictably interpreted my silence as surrender. She had never fought back before. 4 weeks after my surgery, she posted a photo on Facebook, her new SUV gleaming in the sunlight. "New chapter, new wheels," the caption read. I stared at that photo for a long time.
The joy on her face that came from stealing from her dying sister settled something cold into my chest. Certainty. A few days later, she showed up at the hospital for my follow-up appointment. "Nice car, right?" she said, settling into the chair beside me. "I should really thank you for it." I said nothing. Inside my bag, my phone was recording every word. "What are you going to do? Sue me?" she continued, voice light. "Mom and Dad would never let you destroy the family over money. And honestly, you should be grateful someone's actually using that money instead of letting it sit in an account for a dead woman." I saved the recording. Then I called Morrison. The process server found Rebecca 3 days after she registered her new license plates. Inside the envelope was an immediate freeze on all her bank accounts, an injunction preventing her from selling the SUV, and a summons to appear in civil court. For the first time in her life, Rebecca's hands shook. She called me 10 times. I watched her name flash on my screen, listened to the phone buzz against the table, and felt nothing. No guilt, no urge to pick up and smooth things over. I let it ring until it stopped. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. I sat behind Morrison at the plaintiff's table. Rebecca sat across the aisle, avoiding my gaze. Morrison presented the case piece by piece. First came the ATM footage, showing the butterfly tattoo on her wrist. Next, the bank records detailing the 4 withdrawals of $10,000 each. Then, the handwriting expert testified. The signature was professional, confident, written by someone who had practiced this before. Morrison played the recording, and Rebecca's voice filled the courtroom, clear and contemptuous. "You should be grateful someone's actually using that money instead of letting it sit in an account for a dead woman." I watched the judge's face harden. Then Morrison presented the additional evidence he had uncovered, a pattern of small frauds stretching back over a decade. A credit union loan from 5 years ago for $8,000, taken out in my name with my forged signature. An insurance claim from 4 years ago I never filed. A store credit account opened 3 years ago, maxed out and sent to collections. A decade of small frauds, each one quietly absorbed by a sister who never knew she was being robbed. Each one teaching Rebecca that I was an endless, consequence-free resource. The courtroom was absolutely silent. My mother stood up, trembling, and said, "We didn't know. We didn't want to know." My father, looking every bit of his 78 years, spoke next. "We failed you. We've been failing you your whole life." It wasn't enough, but it was the first true thing either of them had said to me in 36 years. The judge delivered her ruling. Full restitution of $48,000 plus interest, the SUV seized and sold at auction, and the case formally referred to the county prosecutor's office for criminal charges for forgery and identity fraud. Rebecca broke down completely, begging me to make it stop. I looked at this woman who had stolen from me for a decade, who had laughed at the idea of me dying, and I said nothing. The case went forward. Rebecca pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 18 months of probation, community service, and full restitution. 6 months after the trial, I barely recognized my own life. My surgery was successful, the money was back, and the hospital promoted me. I moved to a new apartment, small but with a balcony overlooking a quiet park. I was thinking about coffee with Mrs. Patterson next week, about the promotion I had earned, about this life I had built from the wreckage of the one that was stolen from me. The real victory was this freedom, the freedom to build a life that didn't depend on people who had failed me, the freedom to finally, after 36 years, be enough for myself. Michelle's story shows us the truth. Boundaries are not betrayal, choosing yourself is not selfish, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop protecting the people who keep hurting you. If you recognized yourself in Michelle, if you have spent years being the family shock absorber, I want you to know this. It is never too late to change the story. You deserve to be more than someone else's safety net. If this story resonated, please leave a comment and tell me, have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with family? What did you learn from that experience? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you want more stories like this one, where silent victims find their voice and justice, please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Thank you for listening, and remember, you matter. You always have.